my name is Tokar. I am a professional geologist. My background is in environmental consulting and geological consulting. I have a master's degree in geology from Bowling Green State University here in Northwest Ohio. I worked in the environmental consulting world for 6, 7 years, and then I worked for an aggregate mining company for about 6 years before starting natural resources management. And because we dealt with various environmental projects throughout that first 12, 15 years of my career, when I started natural resources management, part of the work that we do is with wastewater treatment, mainly in the aggregate industry and some of various industrial wastewater projects. The PrO2, just because of the way the oxygen's delivered, it's 100% oxygen and it's delivered in the molecular level, as opposed to fine bubble diffusion, which you're grabbing air, which is only 20% oxygen, and you're introducing it into the water column as a bubble. So as the bubble rises to the surface, there's only a very small time frame where oxygen exchange can happen because the bubble's moving through the water table or the water column, and as soon as it reaches the surface, it's gone. So it's not available. That air is not available anymore for the biology to utilize it. As opposed to the PrO2, it dissipates into the water column in a molecular state. So the way I've heard it described before that is easiest to understand is it's like adding creamer to coffee. So you pour that creamer in the coffee and it dissipates throughout the whole entire cup of coffee and it stays there until it's utilized. Whereas, as opposed to if you were bubbling air into a fish tank in a diffuser, the bubbles would rise to the surface immediately and dissipate and be gone, and you wouldn't have that opportunity to exchange air anymore or oxygen in the air. So there's two things going on. The oxygen concentration's higher in the PrO2 system than it would be for a bubble of air out of a diffuser, and there's a time factor there. That oxygen delivered by the PrO2 is there and it stays there until it's utilized somehow, either chemically or biologically. As opposed to air, you have maybe minutes or even seconds in some instances, just depending on how fast the bubble rises through a water column. We were contacted by Radney Redmer and the GPS folks. They had set up the PrO2 at this wastewater treatment plant, and he wanted us to be involved in the project to collect information and data while the trial was going on. So the way it was set up was that the PrO2 was utilized to track the efficiency and operational factors in the wastewater treatment process in place of the fine bubble diffusers that they were currently using. It was a great setup because there were two different portions of the plant where these aeration tanks were separated, and they operated a number of them, 4 of them I believe, individually. So there were 4 different sections that operated, and they were operated very similar. So what we could do, and what we did do for this study, is we took one of the aeration tanks, which we called tank 1, and we used that as the tank where we supplemented oxygen delivery with the PrO2. The second tank, which was identical and operated identically, was labeled tank 2, and that was just allowed to operate normally. Our process was to introduce the PrO2 oxygen delivery system in tank 1, and we would monitor various performance standards of nutrients and the treatment parameters at the end of the tank. And we would also monitor those same parameters in tank 2, which was the control tank, throughout the course of the study. And the goal was to evaluate, by shutting down a portion of the aerators in tank 1, replacing that with the PrO2 machine, were there any efficiencies developed in that process? The plant itself was a medium-sized plant for Genesee County, Michigan. The daily flow through was about somewhere around 20 million gallons per day, the range being about 18 to 28. Obviously, it just depends upon the flow into the plant, but average probably about 20 million gallons per day. Although it had a capacity of about total of somewhere between 45 and 50 million gallons per day, I think. So it wasn't operating at its full capacity yet. The most important part is that we were able to keep up with the treatment and meet the treatment goals of the wastewater treatment plant, very similar to the tank that was using blower supplied oxygen or the fine bubble diffusers only.
Mm.
So we were able to save some electricity costs. We were able to keep up with the system and still meet the performance standards that are required for the wastewater treatment itself. Yeah, so the testing was done both field testing with field instruments and also laboratory testing. So Genesee County, the treatment plant was set up with its own laboratory. So they were able to analyze these samples on a daily basis for things like BOD, COD, ammonia, nitrate, phosphorus, total organic carbon. We did send some into the laboratory, some split samples as well, to see how the comparisons were for some quality control. But our quality control samples worked out. There weren't any problems noted in the laboratory analysis. The biggest change that we noted was the usage of electricity, and that's mainly because blowers that supplied the air for the diffusers use up a lot of electricity. And that's a large cost of the aeration systems. There were 4 passes in this trial tank, and we
Okay.
essentially shut one of the passes off. The first pass actually where the effluent entered the tank. So
Okay.
we were able to incorporate the oxygen immediately in that first pass so it could start working immediately on the wastewater and assisting the biology. We were
Okay.
able to shut the aerators off in that entire first pass, obviously reducing the amount of energy needed to run that part of the plant. So we
Okay.
tracked that energy usage and we were able to show it came out to about a 15% energy cost savings. I would say to them that using this PrO2 system would definitely enhance the effectiveness of the aeration. It would make the treatment more efficient. And because of that, it's going to lower the costs because you're replacing large units to trying to deliver air and using a lot of electricity as opposed to a system that uses way less electricity. It uses more oxygen, however, it's using it in a more efficient manner. So ultimately, you're going to be able to get the same result treatment-wise with lower costs as you would in relation to this traditional method that has been used for decades and designed into these wastewater treatment plants. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we notice in the PrO2 is once it's delivered into a certain size tank of water, it dissipates immediately. You're seeing rise in dissolved oxygen levels from one end to the other instantaneously. It's just amazing to me. It's almost like electricity traveling through water. It's that fast. And that's why this system is as efficient as it is when it's introduced to the biology as it becomes available immediately throughout the entire water column. And I know this because we've tested it on, for example, a water tank on a water truck. We had a 1,000-gallon tanker truck that we had filled with water, with groundwater that had very low DO in it. And we introduced the PrO2 into that tank, and we had DO monitors at each end, and we were injecting the oxygen in the middle. And once we started injecting the oxygen in that tank, our DO levels went up in seconds. I mean, it was less than 30 seconds. We could see that dissolved oxygen reading increase immediately. And you would not get that with fine bubble diffusers unless it was you had covered the entire area of the tank and really cranked up the amount of bubbles being diffused in the water. And even then, you're only really getting a 20% oxygen concentration from air into those bubbles as opposed to 100% in the PrO2. I think one of the things we also noticed, it's really not that difficult to retrofit in existing facilities. And obviously, it's always easier to design systems in a new facility, but because it's easy to retrofit these in existing facilities, it's not really that difficult then to incorporate it into existing systems. Yeah, we have used it in the past for treating hydrogen sulfide laden water at a quarry. We found that there's some chemical reactivity or there's some chemistry going on when you introduce this oxygen at a molecular state where, for example, hydrogen sulfide will, when the oxygen is added to it, can precipitate out the sulfur, and then essentially that chemical reaction reduces the hydrogen sulfide down to sulfur and water and oxygen, and therefore
Wow.
the odors are cleaned up immediately. I mean, there's a very significant odor reduction. We're also treating some wastewater at other facilities, grow operation, for example, marijuana grow operation, table water. So we're working on a project at a grow operation to bring the table grow water, which is wastewater, back to drinking water conditions, or so it can be recycled right back into the system. So there's several recycling projects we're working on as well. A project that I'd like to mention that I worked on several years ago. There was an egg cracking facility in the United States that we utilized the PrO2 on before we even introduced biology to it because there was already biology in the settling lagoons, and they had developed a fat layer on top, and that fat layer was, because of the anaerobic conditions, was fairly thick. So we were able to retrofit the PrO2 and create a oxygen wand, and we were able to go around into that lagoon and reduce that fat layer by feet and days. It was just amazing to me how quickly this oxygen works on these organics.